This video is about helping you decide what kind of technical path you want to take. And so for right now, I only have is four. We're going to discuss four paths today just very briefly so you have a good idea as to what you are going to get yourself into. And you're also going to have an idea as to how much money you're going to make as well. So I know that's probably a very important factor. So let's start with software development and software engineering. This is something that I do. I'm a contractor and I do software development for a living. So I could tell you a lot about this topic, but we have time constraints, so I'm just going to discuss very briefly what you're going to get yourself into. Essentially, in this field, what you're going to do is work on many different technologies, many different software technologies, many different frameworks, depending on what kind of developer you are. And there are many kinds. You could be you could follow the .NET path. You could follow a full stack path that is .NET. You could follow a non-.NET path, which is getting more and more popular these days because they're using more and more open source technologies. This is also something you have to keep up. You have to keep up with the new technologies that are coming out. A few years ago, cloud wasn't the biggest thing ever, but now it is. It's becoming a really big thing. And if you're a software developer, you have to start getting your cloud experience now. Right now, I'm going through that transition. I wasn't a cloud developer before, but now I'm starting to learn how to get into the cloud. As for your actual technologies, they'll change. So depending on what you know, you're going to get into a very, very different technologies here and there depending on the work you're doing. So in this case, I have a small dating app that works with Angular and C# with a little bit of HTML. That's how Angular works. So what this does is will create a web application, and it's just supposed to be a very, very rudimentary dating app that has pictures and stuff like that. And you'll be working on many, many different technologies if you're going to the contracting path, or maybe you're going to work on a few if you're going to go through the employee path. This sounds really complicated right now, and it might add more to the complexity, but I promise you the only difference is that there is more stability but less growth in one of them, and the other one there's more risk but there's also more room to grow and to get a better rate as well. So it all depends on what kind of person you are, and I can get into that some more in a different video if you are interested. But for now, I'm just going to tell you some very brief things that you should know if you're considering being a software developer. Your day-to-day will consist of writing code. So writing code and making sure that code works and having a deadline. You have to get your product done by a certain amount of time and make sure that it works. And there's obviously going to be a lot of trial and error, especially in the beginning. But once you get your flow and once you have like a good technology stack that you know, you'll be able to start planning out your career a lot better. So what I recommend if you want to try out this path is try something very simple. Maybe find a course that talks about building a small application from front end to back end. So you'll have a good idea as to what you're going to get into and whether or not you want to take that path. You could specialize in front end stuff being the things that you see. So like the stuff on a website, the web page. And there's backend stuff, which is the things that you don't see but are happening, like C# is a backend language. And then, of course, there's a database that connects to that. That is something else entirely that has your data in it. So if you know all three of these paths, then you'll be able to consider yourself a full stack developer, which is what I think is the most flexible kind of developer that there is. Obviously, the biggest issue with being a software developer is that you must always update your skills and you must never ever remain stagnant, because there will be one day that your skills will not be viable. And there's more to it than that, but this is just a really brief overview on what it is to be a developer. And I'm just giving you some small examples here and there as to the actual differences between the technologies. This is TypeScript, which is an Angular. This is a TypeScript where for me this is an Angular project. And so that's one different language entirely. This is a JavaScript language. This is a C#. This is C#, so this is an object-oriented programming language. You're probably learning this in school. And this is really important to learn because this is a majority of the jobs do use object-oriented programming or some kind of it, either C# or Java, depending. And this is more TypeScript. And this is from front-end stuff here. This is HTML. This is written in Angular. So some of the text here is going to be a little different to what you're probably used to with straight-up HTML5. But it's basically very similar, and it does the same function. It just shows you the website. So that's what a software developer or software engineer is, at least this very brief overview. So now we're going to get into the network engineer. And for that, I have this for you. A network engineer is in charge of the actual network infrastructure and how to connect to different computers, essentially. So you're going to have to learn some technologies like the switches are getting more and more obsolete, but you should still learn these because they're still being used, because we're using routers now. You have to learn what a firewall is, what load balancing means in a project, and how to design your network to do whatever it is you wanted it to do and to connect to other networks. So that is the main thing that network people are gonna get into. And this is essentially a very, very brief summary of what it is to go into that network path. I can't tell you from experience because I'm not a network individual, but I do have a certification that has to do with networking. So I had to learn a little bit of what it is to do I have to learn networking. I did have to learn a little bit of what it is to configure a router and how to do subnetting, which is something that's very important in networking. But this is, again, a brief overview and just seeing these technologies here. And this is going to be the thing that you're going to be mostly working on and learning about firewalls and stuff. That is what it means to be a network engineer from a very, very high bird's eye view from someone who's never done networking in an actual real life job. But after networking, there's cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is very similar to network engineers, except that you focus mostly on intrusions and how to protect the infrastructure in your business from, bad actors or from things that can go wrong. So that's also in this PDF. It's a very nice PDF. This PDF is what I use to help me pass the certification for Security Plus. So here, I'm going to go to the firewall. That's really important. So you're going to learn about firewalls and security devices. That goes hand in hand with networking. But in this case, your main focus is actually going to be the security part of that entire infrastructure. So you're going to learn everything you need to learn about. So you have to learn everything you need to learn about threats, vulnerabilities, and how to deal with them. So let's just go down to where we start talking about the actual problems, because this is a really big... Okay, here we go. So here we talk about actual security and security awareness. So you have to learn how to actually make your whatever infrastructure you're working on intrusion resistant. And if not, then you will have to also learn how to detect these intrusions and apply technologies to do so. There's many concepts involved with this. This entire, after the top part, which is the networking part, everything else has to do with security. This is a cybersecurity exam after all. And these are all the kinds of attacks that you're going to have to learn. And there's more than this. There's a lot more to this than what I'm just showing you. But again, it's a brief overview. If you like networking or if you like networking, but you want to do more of the really cool hacking kind of thing, that's actually not really it's cool, but it's not really as cool as the movies make it out to be, then maybe you should look into cybersecurity. I will say that cybersecurity is a growing industry, and it's also changing, not as much as the software development industry. Software development changes nearly every year, but this changes a little bit right now. This test does not have cloud in it, but cloud is a new thing that they've added to this test, just to let you know if you're doing this. So this does change, but not as much as this up here. So if you want something with a little bit more stability, it's still going to change, but these two things will probably not change as much as this one up here is. And then finally, technical support. Technical support is basically the people who are, supporting supporting your development. They are in charge of your hardware. They run diagnostics on hardware. They're basically the guys that set up things for you when you need it on your computer in a company. And I will say that the future for the technical support person is not as bright as these three up here, because new technologies are taking over some of the roles that technical support will do, and that's reflected on their salary. So I'm going to show you that right now. Let's go into their salaries. So for software engineer, according to PayScale at least, the average salary is $83,000 and change. I could tell you that you can make way more than this. I have made less than this before, and I have made more than this before in the past, depending on the contracts. 84,000 I think is a decent average to make, but I would say this is probably closer to 90,000. That's just me though. That's just from my own personal experiences. But yeah, you can make some good money with being a software engineer. Just gotta make sure you keep up with the technologies. And let's move on to the cybersecurity part. Now, cybersecurity, I don't know too much about this number, but according to PayScale, it's actually pretty high, at about 95K, depending on your experience. So remember, all this is contingent on experience, and this is just the average amount of all the positions available. So you have to consider if they're asking for like a senior or a junior. And yeah, you can make $83,000 as a junior, depending on where you go and the technologies. I don't know about cybersecurity if you can make $94,000 off the bat, but I think you can. So you just have to look more into that, but this is just what the pay scale tells me. As a network engineer, it's about $70,000. I think that's about right. The network engineer role is more straightforward than these two, and its amount of growth isn't as much as these two up here, according to other stats that I'm looking at. But it's still a pretty good industry to get into, because you're always going to need a network engineer to run your networks, because your computers always need a network to connect to. And finally, technical support, 50K average. I think that's about right. I think 50K might actually be a little bit higher on the median range, but I think this is a pretty decent number to know. The reason for this is because your technical support people are basically being pushed out a bit to other roles. There are other things that are starting to take over what they used to do. Like there are system admins roles that are probably being replaced by another emerging role called DevOps. Now the thing is that DevOps has technically always existed, but now it has like an actual, now things are getting more and more structured when it comes to it. And they're separating that role separating the role from a system admin role to a DevOps role to a technical support role. And other technologies are taking over what it means to be a technical support, so there's less and less things to do. I would say that this is probably, like, if you had to choose between one of these paths, this is probably the easier path, but it is also the path that will get more and more replaced as automation becomes more and more prevalent in the technical space. So I think that's it. This is a quick video again. I just wanted to give you a small, brief rundown on some really popular jobs in the IT industry. I know there's other jobs as well, like data scientists, data analysts, but I don't know too much about them. And this is just the things that I know, and from what I can tell you from my own experiences. So if you like this video, I would like you to subscribe and write whatever you want in the comments. And if you want me to get more in depth into these subjects, you could just let me know. So, this is simply too technical, and I'm going to go. See ya next time.